on who we are. So essentially the timeline, Solano County staff are writing the glossary and cleaning up legal language. The final draft will be submitted to County Council to review in coming weeks. And the ideal timeline for adoption is the next Fire Safe Council meeting and the 27th. I just got a message from Tracy stating that if you have any technical difficulties, you can put that in the chat and we'll try to help you fix them. Membership, we're hoping to confirm the voting members at the next meeting as well, because the approval mechanism for the Fire Safe Council bylaws update, the bylaws, basically approval mechanism for the bylaws is the voting members will be asked to adopt the approved bylaws to make it approved bylaws for the Fire Safe Council. We hope to do that at the February 27th meeting. So if for some reason we need more time, we'll punt it to the next meeting, but we're hoping to get this all secured and lined up at the next meeting on the 27th. Any questions? Okay. I'm not seeing any. It's my view here.
Hey, Chris, I have one question. This is Mark Junie.
Okay.
I'm just curious if we'll be able to have copies of these slides for the meeting.
Yeah, I think we can share these slides.
Okay, thank you.
There will be a recording up on the Solano RCD website. And I can send that out to the same mailing list as to one that people received the notification about this meeting through when those are up.
Which will include the slides?
It'll include like the presentation. I can include the slides if you'd like. Yeah.
Please.
Great.
Great. If we're done with that, then I'll move on to me.
Yeah, so Elizabeth is going to give us, she's up next, and she's going to be filling us in on the calendar moving forward.
So for those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Elizabeth. I work with Solano RCD. I'm kind of stepping in for Karen, who's been present at all of our other meetings. She just had a baby, and so she's out on maternity leave. I'm mostly here to present on some proposed dates for the rest of the calendar year for Solano Fire Safe Council meetings. These will be approved by the council once they go through approving the bylaws that have thus far been written. And so once they approve the final bylaws, this will be one of the first agenda items, is approving these dates. Since we believe they'll probably approve these dates, it's pretty good to actually get this in your calendar. So this we definitely will send out when we send out a recap of what happened at this meeting, is so that you guys have a copy of these dates. But again, these have not been set for sure, but they're in all likelihood going to be set. Main thing to realize is that most of these fall on the third Monday of the month, the exception being whenever there's a federally recognized holiday. So that should be pretty straightforward. We're also going to do a poll real quick. We're going to do 2 polls. We're going to do one poll that's about what time we meet at, to see if there's any preferences. Oh, I need to read through the closed captioning. Sorry. Just in terms of what the dates are, there's also, so the upcoming date. So February 27th will for sure be the next Fire Safe Council meeting. So make sure that's in your agenda. In your calendars. And then the following will be the March 20th, April 17th, May 15th, June 12th, July 17th, August 21st, September 18th, October 16th, November 20th, and December 18th, for those of you that want to put it in their calendars. Next up, we're going to do a poll. And Tracy just put that up. So we're doing a poll for meeting time to see if you want to adjust, if there's a preference. We may move the meeting times depending upon what people decide they like, because this is a rather late meeting and it may work better for some to have an earlier time. Give it another couple seconds and then we'll post the results. Again, those options are 4 to 5:30, 5 to 6:30, 6 to 7:30, and then no preference for those of you who will show up regardless of when it is. It's about 85% participation. Tracy, I think we could probably share the results of that.
They're up.
Okay. Great. So top pick was 5 to 6:30.
Although it's pretty close. So 8 people chose 5 to 6:30, 7 chose 6 to 7:30, and 6 chose 4 to 5:30. So not a clear preference.
Yeah.
But the coordinating committee will take it into consideration.
Yeah. When we send out the invite for the next meeting, it'll be with the understanding that what the results were here. So we haven't determined the date or the time, the date set of February 27th, but the time has TBD. But when we send out the Zoom invite, it'll be clear. We have one other poll where we're trying to just gauge interest in a hybrid style meeting. Right now, we do not have the facilities. So this is kind of a long-term thing to see if there is a large interest in having a hybrid option. The idea is that we're always going to have a virtual option so that as many people as possible can always make the meetings. But if there's little interest in hybrid, then depending on interest, it will determine if a hybrid option becomes available in the future. So,
You know, Elizabeth, it doesn't look like this poll is working. I wonder if you have to reset it.
oh, let me go back. Let me do that real quick. Watch. Okay, so working now? Great.
Yep. And again, folks, we're interested in your preference. If we do have a hybrid option in the future, is that something you'd be interested versus just joining us on, not just, but only joining us on Zoom?
Okay, great.
It's up, Elizabeth.
Great. So it looks like 11 people are interested in hybrid, 8% or 32% in virtual, and then 6 of you have no preference. This is good to know. And once the council starts getting moving, I think there will just more information for whether we want to move in that direction or not. So that's it for my update. So after me, I think, Chris, do you want to introduce our next speaker? You're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks for that information. And thanks everyone for participating. Although we were kind of hoping for a landslide one way or the other on some of them, it's almost a totally equal answers, but it's still a good idea to get out there and see what membership are thinking as far as when and where of meeting. So the next up is Matthew Setti. He's with the Nevada Environmental, and he and his group have been hired as the county coordinator for the wildfire partnership in Solano County. And he's going to give a presentation on focused on the upcoming CAL FIRE grant and what we're looking at and different options we're thinking about.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, my name is Matt Setti. You hear me okay? Not sure I got good volume.
Yep.
So I've been working with Nancy Nelson on getting sort of our feet a little bit wet here with all the various elements of the county wildfire program. You can go ahead and jump to the first slide there. Our firm is a small business based in Reno, Nevada, but we work all over California. And so our role really is to assist the county with the advisement, development, implementation of wildfire protection projects. We have capabilities that range from technical services to community outreach services, data management, wildfire specific type of tasks. And we'll bring any of those to bear within our contract terms. So one of the key elements of our role here is going to be to provide some communication kind of as a clearinghouse for the county and really assist Nancy in facilitating kind of a common voice in what we're looking for in wildfire activities in the area. As I mentioned, we do a fair amount of the actual technical services, but also those services that support the planning. So facilitating the planning and we will either self-perform or manage the development of requisite data as we need, as needed for different planning activities. And then finally, while we're not all of these different skill sets are not going to come to bear on every project, a variety of forestry biology, CEQA NEPA analysis, GIS, and some of the more on the boots on the ground technical services down to implementation of flagging zones and design development, design build wildfire mitigation programs. So next slide. The first real if you want to jump to the next slide, the first real task here for us is to assist this group in the development of an application for the CAL FIRE wildfire prevention program. There's really three main portions of that, which are the hazardous fuel reductions, the wildfire prevention planning, and the wildfire prevention education. As we go through and get the kind of highest and most desired efforts from each of the stakeholders, we'll synthesize an application that will reflect either one or multiple of these, essentially these major topics that are eligible for funding. Next slide. So when we look at these costs, we need to map out what CAL FIRE is looking for in terms of being a competitive, to be competitively selected in these. Additionally, we want to make sure that we propose a type of scope of work and a type of project that is well thought out financially, so the county does not end up with essentially unfunded elements of their scope of work. So therefore, we're going to look really closely at how we scope this with respect to the eligible costs versus non-eligible costs. And to the degree we can, we typically try to minimize ineligible costs on these things. Go ahead, next slide. The grant conditions are pretty broad, and there's several lines of communication with CAL FIRE on what the most preferred grant would be, or most preferred application content would be. The maximum ask for this grant is $5 million. That doesn't all have to be spent in 1 year. It gets encumbered in that first year when the grant's awarded, and then there's usually a 4 or 5 year period at which the projects can be implemented. The county in this role is the eligible applicant. Others can apply, but you know, we're really hoping to look for a partnership in the applications here. Fire Safe Councils can apply as long as they're a 501c3. But what we're looking for here is a group of projects that we can partner with the RCD, the Fire Safe Councils, and others in order to get the broadest effect over the community. When we do end up with partners on this, the partners come to the table with a letter of commitment, which really is proof to CAL FIRE that people are committing the resources to support those tasks of work. The different qualifying projects are pretty narrowly defined by CAL FIRE, and those include those that have direct applicable mitigative measures to address hazards and threatened properties. So they have to be fairly focused on the nature of the project. And then also the applicant has to have the ability to plan, administer, and complete the grant project. Now, in this case, I'm working on an existing grant. And so the grants themselves don't pay for the application of the grant, but the existing grant helps, like, for instance, our time to develop this application. So the overall conditions are pretty extensive. There's 33 total conditions, most of which are fairly easy to meet. It's just a matter of crossing your I's and dotting your T's, right? So next slide, please. So within the three major categories: hazard field reduction, wildfire prevention planning, wildfire prevention education, there's 100 different things that we can describe as either activities or practices. And if we go to the next slide, we can get into a little bit of those. Sorry, I deleted that slide, but what we're really talking about is the prevention is active projects, fuels reduction, thinning, those type of deals. Fire risk mapping could be part of the planning efforts, how we go about that, how we synthesize the mapping that's already occurring by the other entities and stakeholders and players that are involved. Now we get that into a common data set. And then also everything from signage as far as evacuation routes and other elements like this can go into the education portion as well. The production of educational materials for fire safe councils to use with their clientele. Those types of things could also be funded under these grants. So we have just started to kind of think through the grant strategy. I've been on board about a week now. We started to go through this. And so this is really kind of my thoughts on this. But as far as the overall strategy is, I see value because of the diversity of the stakeholders within Solano County. I see value in targeting multiple elements of fundable projects. So not throwing all of our cards in one basket. We want to certainly align these activities to support the existing efforts of the CWPP, the resource conservation districts, the priorities of the fire safe councils. We want to pre-screen to the degree we can and infill the environmental and the planning information in order to sort of deconflict these projects under CEQA. Our experience on other projects has been that the more that we do that up front, the simpler and cleaner the CEQA documents become, and we generally can move through these things a little quicker. That extends to cultural and other types of specific resources. And then ultimately, we want to design projects to maximize some of the benefits of programmatic approvals on these, using both the more recent Cal VTP process, as well as trying to consolidate the different areas of projects to where if we have one environmental document, we can have that span over a couple different potential project areas. So we end up with a pre-approval on those project areas. The application of the programmatic EIR process has a lot of benefits looking forward in terms of expediting the permitting process and the CEQA approval process. And it also allows us to really be able to clearly define the additional work that needs to be done when like a CWPP project comes to maturity and is ready for funding. Then we certainly know under a programmatic EIR what we have to do as far as the specific tasks for authorizations of those. So, the key there is that the more that we can utilize programmatic approvals of certain elements of these projects, the cleaner we can focus on those specific needs, and the more money actually goes towards treatment of projects versus the analysis and the permitting of the projects. So go ahead and And that's really all my introduction for that, for the overall process. What I'm getting my feet wet right now is meeting with the various existing players and learning off of their experience here, trying to figure out how we're going to benefit the whole to the greatest effect. Part of that will kind of culminate when Nancy and I sit down and sort of rescope our support to the county on this. You know, what I see as the immediate steps in order to meet the March deadline for the CAL FIRE grant is to coordinate the ask. Like we need to be clear on what we're wanting, and we need support from the various stakeholders that is the highest and best need for the county. We want to facilitate an agreement of the group of projects within one or more of the three major activity groups. So as I mentioned, I personally think that there's benefit to asking for certain activities to be funded through multiple, through either all three or at least two of the three groups versus say putting all of our requests into fuels reduction in a specific area. And in part, that's because we don't yet have a CWPP that's already gone out and defined the projects. So we're kind of co-processing these two elements here. We're going to need to go out here in the short term, and I have a team to do this, to infill planning data to make sure that we have a robust argument for funding within the application. Sometimes that is a desktop GIS study. Sometimes we need boots on the ground, depending on what the real project definition that we're going for. We have assembled different activity costs from all over the state and have a pretty good handle on what the per unit costs for various wildfire prescriptions are, or mitigation prescriptions. We will do our best to go through and provide pretty detailed estimates to where when we get to the point where we're awarded the grant and manage the grant, that there's nothing that's too out of line with what we would expect. Some of that goes down to where you have to kind of estimate what you think that budget's going to be. Others will be much more granular, and we'll be able to put cost per unit elements on those. The grant funding expenditure timeline will be interesting because depending on the suite of activities that are requested for funding, they will have both different development and different implementation periods. The expenditures can run out to 2029 on these projects. However, you know, these are usually fairly front loaded, but you know, on a given process, or on a given activity, we want to make sure that we implemented it with the appropriate ecological timelines and other timelines to indicate that some of these may need to be put out that far. For instance, one of the things that's eligible under this grant is prescription grazing. So it may be that it takes a year or two to get areas prepared for grazing and funding on those. And then, you know, in that third or fourth year, you may end up doing the grazing. So there's some of those kind of time-derived implementation plans. And then finally, our team here will be preparing this application, sending it around for everybody's input, and providing sort of a work plan for how the various entities that are going to contribute to this application will come together. But ultimately, we'll produce the document under a county banner, and we'll submit it from that perspective. So I'm happy to field any questions. I believe Tracy's online as well to field any questions with her experience with these grants.
And I can help facilitate questions if anybody has them. And just a reminder, so these grants are due on March 15th. And so the intention is at the February 27th meeting, where you all, the voting members, will be approving the bylaws, that you would then be approving the application to CAL FIRE. So Nancy and Matt can get that submitted by March 15th. So anybody have any questions? If you could raise your hand, that way you'll come up and we'll see who's there. Go ahead, Rochelle.
Yes, and forgive me for not being on video. I've just been kind of going from place to place today. So My experience with CAL FIRE is that, they have a lot of areas that they want to focus on, being the state responsibility area being a priority. And in some of the activities that you're proposing, how are you going to align some of those things to make sure it's really meeting their priorities? And then just for a little context, Matt, because I know you're new here, I'm the president of the Green Valley Fire Safe Council. We got grant funds to do a fuel break and a fire break and a shaded fuel break. And we've been very active in this area of the county doing things like LE 100 defensible space inspections, green waste events, et cetera. So I just curious about, how it's going to be really tailored. I know that there's specific things that give us more points than less points. We don't have the CWPP in place yet. However, both the Pleasants Valley and the Green Valley Fire Safe Councils have done community wildfire risk assessments. So some of that could be drawn from there. So that's my first question.
Well, as you mentioned, without a CWPP, that leaves a little bit of latitude in how we prioritize those projects. Our initial take on this would that we would build on the developments that the different fire safe councils already have with respect to those the community assessments. If we need to go in and infill elements of those, or if there are projects that link multiple existing projects together, those are always prioritized higher. So certainly with the component of this that is actual projects on the ground, we would sit down and map these out with respect to what you guys have already have in the chute as far as planning goes, and pursue those infill projects that add value to both of the existing projects. I think the organizing the countywide fire safe council and getting that structure set is going to help me understand a lot in terms of the role that our team will provide in terms of supporting the other components, the planning and the education components that are supported and desired at the Fire Safe Council, at the local Fire Safe Council level. So I don't have a very good answer for you yet, I guess is the answer. But we're working on those and we're aware that there's a lot of good work that's been done to build on.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have a second question, Rochelle?
Yeah, I think it was kind of more of a statement, but I think Matt kind of addressed that, and that is, given the fact that we have a lot of data and we've done, a fair amount of just kind of background research in terms of the proposal that we wrote locally, right? And doesn't cover all of the county. It was just that, would you be, instead of going out and redoing it yourself, you'd be tapping into what we have available, I'm assuming. And I think you mentioned that in your answer. So that got to my second question.
Yeah, absolutely. Our thought is to kind of synthesize a GIS of time-derived projects. My team's put together a GIS so far for planning data that shows pretty much all of our CAL FIRE data past the LNR fire boundaries, all of these other components. And that's going to help us sort of spatially identify where we have gaps in the planning geographically.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And we have, I think, a related question in the chat from Sigmund is, how will areas be selected for brush and fuel removals? Do you want to speak to that anymore? Matt?
Well, I mean, I certainly have my opinion on how we should go about it. Typically, I'm a little hesitant to speak to that issue without first, we have a meeting scheduled later this week with Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And so, in many of these areas, we want to utilize those same methodologies that we're using across the board. And so, rather than shooting from the hip, I think I'm going to defer that we will put out criteria to evaluate it, what areas are needed, and then how do we prioritize amongst those areas. And those criteria need to be aligned with both the standard CAL FIRE work, but also the work that SWCA is doing on their community wildfire protection plan. I think Nancy's got her hand up on that one. She might want to jump in.
Yeah, to that point, I just wanted to add, so this is where we're relying on the local fire safe councils, so our leadership to help us to prioritize those areas. And so we'll be working closely with Pleasant Valley and Green Valley to determine those, priority projects for recommendation and consideration.
One thing to keep in mind is CAL FIRE in their application guidance, their guidance document, prioritizes projects that have immediate and direct impacts to habitable structures and lives. So access corridors, homes, all of those areas that are of the highest susceptibility to wildfire obviously have a higher priority on those. So it makes sense to getting the resiliency work underway nearest to the houses first, before you spend a lot of money out in the hinterlands.
We have a related question from Leanne from Pleasants Valley Fire Safe Council. Will the burned area of Pleasants Valley English Hills be given priority for reduction?
Again, and that's kind of why I mentioned that on prioritizing areas proximate to houses. The facilitation of this discussion that we want to have is that exact topic. If you live in English Hills, then you want that area prioritized above other areas. If you live in Green Valley, then you may want that prioritized. So I think having those common environmental metrics at which we look at the need and the risk and applying those uniformly, typically in a GIS analysis leads to that answer. It leads to how do we go about prioritizing those. So I'm not necessarily sure what that answer is going to be yet. It's not certainly my decision to make. It's my decision to facilitate that answer.
Great. And Vicki, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this discussion. This is Vicki Amato. I'm with SWCA, the PM for the CWPP. Matt, as you mentioned, we have a meeting scheduled for later this week. So we're going to really get into some of the details on this, but I do want the group to know that, in terms of the status of the plan, I think we're in pretty good position to be able to delineate projects based on the risk assessment. We have, a preliminary version of the risk assessment that has been provided to the core team. We also carried out on the ground hazard assessments late last year that contributes to the risk assessment. So we have metrics to utilize to help to prioritize areas. And we also have recommendation matrices that have already been delivered to the core team that are currently under review by the core team. And so hopefully all of these, pieces will help in development of this grant application. And that way it will be consistent with the findings of the CWPP. So just in summary, we are pretty far along, and I think we are in a good position to help to inform this application process.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're kind of trying to ghost of effort parallel to the CWPP, so we end up with a project that dovetails in with those findings,
Yeah.
those recommendations.
Exactly, and I do think that we're far enough along that we can definitely contribute to this.
Great.
Excellent. And we have David Stevens has a comment in the chat or a question. Projects to improve compliance with defensible space requirements as required by Public Resources Code Section 4291, which are projects eligible for CCI funds, are low-income, disabled, or elderly households per California requirements. This is one of the bullets from CAL FIRE's grant website. Do we know what the definition of low-income, disabled, or elderly households is per California requirements? I can cover that one if you want, Matt.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So disabled and elderly, I've never seen that be legally defined in a grant. Like people, you can kind of self-select that. There are definitions now for their low income and disadvantaged, and those are by census tract. So that's usually how CAL FIRE is requiring it these days. Is there more you want to add to that, Matt?
No, that we generally get that via the Tiger data tools from the federal government that gets reported up to those.
And I'll put a link in the chat after we're done with this so people can see the map that CAL FIRE in the state's using. And Leanne went back to what she was saying about the burned areas, priority for reduction, that she's mainly referring to roadways, so evacuation routes and such.
Yeah, I mean, my personal take when we're looking at a community that doesn't have an existing implemented program is that we do those things that have the greatest effect to the most number of residents first, meaning evacuation corridors, screening breaks, fire breaks. So those type of projects that are often driven by the OES preferences or the local fire preferences. But the result of those is greater emergency service access to areas that are potentially at risk and safer egress from those areas. So, yeah, I would certainly advocate for the prioritization of fuels work along emergency access routes.
Great, and I think we're on time, so we'll pass it back over to Chris. Thank you, Matt.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Matt, for that great discussion on an exciting opportunity that's coming up. And so next on the agenda, we have Ed King, the Ag Commissioner for Solano County, that's going to give a presentation on the Ag Pass program and its development, as well as answer questions.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you and share a little bit about exactly what an Ag Pass program is, and then how such a program may look and work here in Solano. So really, since we've been having more intense and longer lasting wildfire events in California in recent years, and along with that, large scale evacuation areas that in some cases are in place for weeks at a time. Ag industry, farmers and ranchers have expressed an interest up and down the state to have access to evacuation areas during times of emergency. So there's been a number of counties that have been out on the forefront of this, developing Ag Pass programs. Butte County developed a livestock pass program following the Camp Fire, and then closer to home to us, Napa and Sonoma have developed both kind of dual track programs for livestock and agriculture in recent years. Then in 2021, the Cattlemen's Association sponsored a bill, AB 1103, that Megan Dolly carried, that eventually was signed into law by the governor and went into effect last year. But this legislation was specifically created structure and procedures for livestock pass program, not all encompassing of agriculture as well. It's just specific to livestock. So how that program works now, defined in state law, is that upon adoption by a county board of supervisors, commercial livestock operators and their managerial employees can apply to a county program to obtain a county issued livestock pass. And all these programs that you may see up and down the state now, they're all administered county by county, but they work more or less in the same way. That you, as a livestock operator, you apply to the county agency leading the program. In some cases, it's the ag department. In some cases, it's a sheriff. In some cases, it's shared responsibility. But you submit an application into the program. The county then verifies that you're a commercial operator. And then you're taken through a required training program that addresses things like fire behavior, safety, incident command structure, communications during emergency response, et cetera. And then you're proactively issued a pass, a livestock pass, that in the event of an emergency, you're a pre-approved holder, pass holder, that may conditionally, this is an important point, conditionally allow you to enter an established evacuation area to provide what the law defines as essential livestock care. So this is feed, water, veterinary care, or to evacuate livestock. Or there's also another point in the bill or in the law now that in addition to livestock care, if emergency responders request of you, then you could also provide some localized or local expertise. If you may know where a particular watering point is or access road or whatnot, you could be involved in that way as well. But even though you have a pass, you've been preemptively issued this pass, access is still governed by incident command. So there may be a point in the incident response where there's still an intensified or high threat to life and property that the program may not be active or you may not be allowed in. But once that initial threat to human health and safety is passed, you could see an opportunity where the program would be activated and you'd be able to enter an evacuation area with your pass. So a couple other things to note about that pass holders or an owner operator, like commercial livestock operator, cannot direct or force an employee to enter an evacuation area, even if they have a pass issued to them. And then also these programs require periodic recertification through a continuing education component as well. So that's really kind of how the livestock pass program it shapes up now. Again, defined in state law. Now here in Solano, we of course have a very diverse agricultural industry, diverse agricultural regions. A livestock pass program alone is probably not going to be sufficient for us. So Nancy and I have been working with Supervisor Vasquez, Sheriff's Office, Office of Emergency Services, our Resource Management Department, and Morgan Doran, who's our UC Cooperative Extension, Natural Resources and Livestock Advisor, to develop a program, a dual track program, both livestock and crop ag program for Solano County. Now, since we have state law that defines how the livestock pass program works, we're going to have to obey that. And so we know how that part of the program will work. On the other hand, for a crop ag, for farmers, we have a little more leniency and a little more say how that portion of the program may develop and look in time. So we're still discussing internally how that best may work and getting feedback from the ag community as well. A couple different options or pathways we could take with this. One, we could mimic the livestock rules and just allow commercial owner, operator, and managerial level employees, or we could require that if you wanted employees to access or obtain a pass and in the event you want them to access an evacuation area, we could take them through the training and certify individual employees. Or a third option may be to put that responsibility on the owner operator themselves. So as a farmer, you could have the pass issued to you, and then you may be responsible for supervising your staff or your employees if you carried them into the evacuation area under your pass. So those are all different models that are actually in play in other counties throughout the state now. So welcome feedback on that and what you may think would work best for you or would be most suitable. But in general, the program would still more or less follow the same track as the livestock pass program, that you would apply, submit an application into the county. We'd verify your status as a commercial livestock operator. And there are some requirements outlined now in the law for that. And then we've also, as we've drafted this up, I have a few other elements or qualifiers that may be more suitable to the ag side of things. So I'll just run through a list here of some of the qualifiers or some of the documentation that we may require to vet you as a legitimate commercial ag operator in the county. So one, you could be required to show that you have a current pesticide permit issued by our office. An IRS Schedule F would also work. Assessors parcel numbers confirming ag zoning for the properties upon which access is sought. Ag land lease documentation and testing to enrollment in a Williamson Act contract. Documentation from our USDA Farm Service Agency office in Vacaville. You could have a current registration of a livestock brand with our State Department of Food and Ag. A valid certified producer certificate. That's a certificate we issue out of our office for growers who are selling at certified farmers markets. A current state organic program registration. Couple more here. A current APA registration, that's another annual certification out of our office. Nursery license. And if none of those kind of fit your bill and we still needed confirmation, we'd be willing to accept confirmation from Cooperative Extension that you're a legitimate or a commercial livestock operator. So, and then once we've verified your status, we would admit you into a training. We'd like to have an in-person training. And once we get up and going, we'll probably hold multiple training sessions per year, both for people who are being newly admitted into the program, but also as we grow the program into the years, we'll be periodically doing continuing education, refresher classes, like I mentioned. But then you're proactively issued a pass, and then again, in the event of an emergency, you're ready to go pending approval by the incident commander at any given point in time. So that's really where we're at with development of a local program here for Solano. Nancy and I are also doing some outreach to our local community animal rescue team. So you may be familiar with CART, C-A-R-T, Community Animal Rescue Team. They're a local nonprofit that helps with animal emergency preparedness, evacuation preparedness, and then also their emergency responders too. So they'd be called in to help folks with animal care and evacuation and so forth during times of emergency. So that's what I have for you tonight. I'd certainly welcome any feedback or questions.
Thank you, Ed. That was very informative. We have a couple minutes for questions. If anybody has a question, you could raise your hand or put it in the chat. Reveille says, our residents want to know if they can obtain a permit before fire season begins. 2.5 years, that's how long our farmer ranchers have been waiting. And so is it possible that those will be in place this year before?
Yes, ideally. We're trying to fast track this, and we need to clear up a few more items internally, but we'll have to take it to the Board of Supervisors ultimately for approval. We'd like to do that very soon, and then ideally have 1 or 2 training sessions this spring, and then have passes issued by late spring, early summer.
Could you explain a little bit more what the training sessions would involve, how long, that kind of thing? Right. So we'd like to keep the length of the training to probably no more than 2 hours. So in law now, there is a defined parameters for what the training curriculum is. So again, it addresses things like fire behavior, fire safety, incident command structure, communication during emergency events. We'd probably also include a couple additional elements for disaster preparedness or ranch and farm preparedness, things of that nature. CAL FIRE simultaneously here has been tasked with developing a uniform training curriculum. So we're waiting for that to come out as well. That might be out as early as March. So we could either
we're either going to do our own training or we'll rely on the CAL FIRE training if it's out in time.
Great. We have time for one more question. Anybody has one? Wonderful. Thank you, Ed. I think now we pass it over to Nancy.
Actually, there was one more question that just came in from David Stevens, if you wouldn't mind, Tracy, facilitating the question.
Says, I feel like most property owners with animals are not commercial in nature. They have horses, chickens, goats, etc., but not for commercial product. What will be available for these folks?
Right. Again, as I mentioned, I think that's the area of expertise that the CART team, Community Animal Rescue, covers. So Nancy and I are going to engage with them and kind of run a parallel discussion with them. So we're not missing that component as we proceed with the formal Ag Pass program.
Thank you, Ed.
Good.
Okay.
Thanks, and Nancy's going to take it from here in our update roundup.
Thank you, Chris. So yes, now we are going to hear from partners and we're going to hear on activity updates. And we're going to begin with Rochelle Sherlock, President of the Green Valley Fire Safe Council. Rochelle, if you can provide an update to us this evening.
Yes, thank you. Really, first of all, this first update is related to the Wildfire Safety Expo that we're planning with the Pleasant Valley Fire Safe Council. And the members on that committee have been Grant Kreinberg, myself, David Stevens, Reveille, and Rose, and Jen Smith, another member from the Pleasant Valley Fire Safe Council. We're actually getting a lot of enthusiasm. We have several sponsors, which is super exciting. And so it's going to be a very fun, interactive day. Food trucks, inflatable firehouse, and all kinds of great demonstrations. So if you haven't already signed up as a vendor, please do so that we can begin to account for space for you, because we want as much information there as possible. And just as a reminder, this is countywide. Also, we're going to have CAL FIRE there doing a wildland fire progressive hosely for us as a demonstration. So the goal is to really attract as many people in the community as possible to come together for this. And we're on track to do that. So super excited about it. We will be distributing the flyer very soon. We want to make sure our sponsor logos are on that flyer so that they're getting the credit for helping us put this on. So stay tuned for that. And if I send it to Elizabeth, I'm hoping that Elizabeth will be able to send it out to this group. So they'll all get the flyer as well as forwarding the vendor form. The second update pertains to the shaded fuel break. So, we've met with the Delta crew and the captain, Mark Jorgensen, to take a look at doing the shaded fuel break where there is an existing notice of exemption. And so we're in the process of getting a contract in place to move forward with that. Already moved forward in terms of getting our burning permit and also the kind of hold harmless agreements going in place. So we're expecting to see some, activity soon. And part of that activity will be doing burning with Dead and Down, and which will be really important. So thank goodness for all this great rain that we just had. That'll make it a lot easier. The archaeological survey for the CalVTP and that whole process, that has been completed. And, we expect to have that document, our CalVTP, by the end of February. So that's our update. We're moving and grooving and really excited about all this work.
Thank you, Rochelle. So our next update will come from the Office of Emergency Services here with Solano County. We have our new Emergency Services Coordinator, Jenny Novelli, here to provide an update on the CWPP process, as well as evacuation planning. Jenny, if you can provide an update.
Thanks, Nancy. Hi, everyone. Yes, so I'm Jenny Novelli. I started with the Office of Emergency Services in September. So I just have a couple updates for you. The first one is on the Zone Haven project. So we just completed training last week for our responders on the system. And then we are now allowing those agencies time to train their own staff on how to use it. And so we're working right now on a go live date for Zone Haven in the spring of this year. And then my CWPP update really just echoes what Vicki put in the chat, and that is that the core team is working on a review of the suggested project matrices that were created during the second core team planning meeting that many of you were at. So those are the two updates that we have on our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate it. So next we have Tanya Meyer with the Yolo County Fire Safe Council providing an update.
All right, sorry, I had to unmute there. Thank you for all this great work. It's good to see things rolling along. We have our Fire Safe Council meeting next or in 2 days on Wednesday, the 25th at 4 p.m. And that'll be a time for our folks to give verbal comments on our community wildfire protection plan draft. And once everyone has given their stamp of approval to that, that's going to go to our Board of Supervisors for a draft for them to look at. And we'll also send it off to CAL FIRE. There will be some iterations and some back and forth, but it's moving along. It's also exciting to announce that we are starting a prescribed burn association, and we're having a launch meeting next month, February 23rd. So you can contact me for more information on that. We're continuing to support our community fire safe councils, and we're also going to be working on applying for funding through CAL FIRE. And that is it for me. Unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you.
So our next update comes from Sherry Gardner with the Napa Communities Firewise Foundation.
Hello, thanks for having me. I love hearing what you guys are all up to. It sounds like great progress. Just a couple quick updates. I know Mike Wilson gave a presentation last month about our fuel reduction projects in kind of your general neighborhood. The only updates there is that there are no plans for this, but there is interest in a ridgetop dozer line along Blue Ridge Road. So if there's any interest on your part in partnering on something like that, you can get in touch with me and Mike, just to kind of put that into the planning hopper. Also, we are having a fire resource fair. It'll be our second annual in conjunction with the Napa Valley Vintners and the Napa Valley Grape Growers at the Napa Expo. And that'll be April 11th. So if you feel like a field trip to come and see what's going on over in Napa and meet some of the vendors and learn there too, you're very welcome. We'll have some demonstrations, and we're trying out a larger space so we can do more hands-on kinds of things. And we'd love to get your input. And we did go through the planning process last year and carried off a smaller one up in St. Helena. So if you have questions about how that went, I'd be happy to share information on that. Fire Safe Councils, we have 20 now, bordering with you all, Gordon Valley, Coombsville Wild Horse Fire Safe Council, and coming soon, the Capel Valley Fire Safe Council. And I know that Gordon Valley and Coombsville Wild Horse would be very happy to do any partnering with you all across the county line. Coombsville Wild Horse Fire Safe Council has just finished their risk assessment and is moving into their planning their CWPP and applying for a Firewise USA certification. And they're also, we did a partnership with Bank of the West to, they provided the funding and some volunteers to do a green sign, or we call it a Reflect to Protect campaign, to order and install the reflective address signs for rural residents so that first responders can find their homes. And we had leftover funding from that project, so we're allowing the different fire safe councils around the county to apply for those extra funds. And Coombsville Wild Horse is pursuing those and also trying to get some additional funding from some more sponsors. And that's been really successful too. I'm happy to share information about how that project rolled out, or pilot project rolled out for that too. So I think that's it. But if you have any questions, I'm always happy to hear from any of you all, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Sherry, and we'll definitely be in touch. Lots of great ideas.
Okay.
So next, I'd like to invite Chief Concepcion to provide an update on behalf of the City Fire District. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Chris Concepcion, Fire Chief of the City of Vacaville, representing the City Fire Chiefs. And I'll be real quick. First, I want to thank all of you for your efforts in keeping our community fire safe. We can't, this is our daily job, but I know that all the efforts that you guys are putting in is much appreciated, because we can't do it without you. So just a couple of things. First thing is, I'm sure all of you already know, as of, I believe it was either January 3rd or January 4th, Cordelia Fire District ceased to essentially exist, and the Fairfield Fire Department is now providing services for that area. According to Chief Matt Lukenbach from Fairfield Fire, they've got a short-term agreement and are working on a longer-term agreement. So more to be known on that, and we'll keep you posted. Second is, we are enjoying all of the rain, but we also know that that is a double-edged sword as far as wildfire is concerned, because that a lot of rain results in a lot of vegetation growth. So weed abatement is going to be a big deal coming up here in the next few months. So we're starting to prepare for that already. And then the last thing, as the county had said, is we are working with, several of our folks attended the train to trainer for Zone Haven for the evacuation plans with the county, and we are looking forward to the go live date on that. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. And then next, I'd like to invite Chief O'Connor to provide an update from the District Chiefs Association.
Today we had our meeting. Dave Stevens was at the meeting. He gave us an update on some of the grant issues. All the chiefs are behind it. We're looking forward to working with the Fire Safe Councils and seeing what we can do to assist you to get the grants that are needed to get this program going all the way. And we're also been taking part in the evacuation, Zone Haven training and all that on the county level. So that's about all I have to say.
Thank you very much. And so next, I would like to call Elizabeth Davis with the Solano RCD up to provide a update on the website and social media.
Hi. Yeah, I'm just going to show you guys. So I've not been the one working on the website, but Sierra couldn't make it tonight. So I'm just going to give you guys kind of a brief overview of where we're at with the website. And so I'm going to share that on my screen so you guys can get a look at it. We're just trying to do some finishing touches, and we're hoping that it'll hopefully be live by February. So it's just a couple more admin things that need to happen. So it's a fully functioning site. Just give me a second. I will share my screen. So, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So this is the website. So I'm just going to give you kind of a brief overview. So this is just the initial page when you open it up. If anyone has any photos, it would be great to send those either to me or to Sierra. Her email and my email will be put in the chat. So you guys can send us any photos, but it'd be great to have local photos because these are just kind of a little bit of stock images. Just kind of a brief overview. Once this is posted live, you guys are going to be able to, like, this isn't official yet. I think we need to pull this directly from our bylaws and things is what's planned to be in here. We are up on Instagram, I believe. I don't have that handle handy. Again, Sierra was supposed to be at this meeting, but just wanted to give you guys a brief overview of kind of what this is looking like. So when we have a CWPP, that's something that we can link in here. The idea is that we are going to have all of our meetings up posted onto this website. So this is a page that'll take you to the local fire safe council. So we have to get some of those up here. And then as more fire safe councils come online, they'll also be hosted here so we can give them space. Yeah, that's the brief update on the website, and it's getting much closer. So the hope is in even just, a couple weeks, we might be there. But hopefully we'll be presenting it at the next meeting, if not likely in March. So
Thank you. This is the first time I'm seeing it. It looks great. Great work and great job, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I might add is that as part of this process of working with the county and the fire safe councils, we're actually going to be offering what they call, I don't like this name, but they're called child sites, which are basically offshoots of the main site to fire safe councils, along with some training and some effort to actually get those going if the fire safe councils choose to take advantage of that. And hopefully in this CAL FIRE grant, we put in more funds so we continue any of that support that might need to happen for fire safe councils on those sites.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
So at this time, we do not have any more updates. We were going to open the rest of the meeting up for comments and a Q&A. So first we can start with just general comments. If anybody would like to make a comment, please unmute yourself and feel free.
Actually, we have a couple questions first for the couple of the speakers. First, there was a question from Matt from Rochelle, which was, how many acres are in the Green Valley Shaded Fuel Break?
I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head, but I can look it up and provide that in a few moments.
Okay. And then Rochelle actually had a question for Chief Concepcion. So go ahead, Rochelle.
Yeah, mine was actually a clarification, and that is that Cordelia Fire Protection District Board will still be intact. They actually have Dave Carpenter continuing on as the fire prevention officer right now, and so operations is under Fairfield Fire. And it's a nuance because yes, Fairfield Fire is doing all of the responses, but it's an important thing to distinguish only because people in their minds think that it doesn't exist at all, when in reality, there are different kinds of formations, as you know. So I just wanted to state that for the general audience there.
Thank you for
And
the clarification.
my comment is, Chris, even if somebody else uses the term child sites, I find that such a demeaning thing to even say. I wouldn't repeat it. I would just they have their own page or something with the fire safe councils. So
yeah, that's just the terminology that's used professionally with websites up, and I also too, it's ridiculous. So we'll come up with something else.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for any of our speakers? And then we have lots of time. So as Nancy said, any comments or questions in general, please go ahead and raise your hand or speak up. There was a lot of good stuff tonight. Wow, we answered all of your questions. That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Any other thoughts? Anybody had an aha moment they want to share with the rest of us? I think that ag pass is really cool and the livestock pass is really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that implemented.
Okay, well, since there's not a whole lot or any questions, I thought we'd close up. And just a meeting reminder, the next meeting is February 27th. And we will send that out. Again, we'll send that out a little earlier. I think once we get in a rhythm, we'll be sending out information early and often to y'all. Other thing is the recording will be on our website of this meeting. And Elizabeth is going to send out slides and a follow-up email to this email. If you have any questions, you can send them to Sierra Piccini. I can put her, I think maybe Tracy already put her information in the chat. Yeah, so that's all I have to say there. We're also excited about the expo. I'm trying to get my board to be a sponsor on the RCD. At first I have to check to see whether it's legal. And then I also know that I need to get back to you all about us having a table there and helping promote the event.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you all. Thanks for coming. Thanks for spending the time.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.